morning, everyone. Here we have, next to me is Matt Abel. He's the Executive Director of NORML, which is the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Mike Elias, who's the President and CEO of Michigan Pure Med, and which has the Common Citizen dispensaries. Maurice Morton, the Managing Partner of, Ken Bryant with Medicine Man of Ann Arbor, and also you're on the Social Equity Board for the state. And Maurice Morton is the Managing Partner of the Morton Law Firm. You know, this is a brand new industry that has a lot of different needs. How difficult has it been for filling jobs in the marijuana industry? Mike, I know that you've got a big operation going.
So it surprisingly hasn't been too bad. We got about 40 positions open up in Marshall, Michigan. It's a 1.2 million square foot hybrid greenhouse in which 200,000 square feet just went up. 40 jobs. We had 800 applicants for 40 jobs. We had a job fair. There was 250 people that showed up physically, and they ranged from ex-CIA agents to engineers to bankers, and there's a whole bunch of people that are just completely interested in trimming, which was something that stuck out for me. But so there are a lot of people chomping at the bit to get in the industry and be a part of the noise, the action, and so my concern isn't so much in finding them, it's retaining them like any other business and developing that talent in-house and building capability to drive continuous improvement. So finding the talent, retaining it like any other business is important. And what we're doing at Common Citizen, Michigan Pure Med, is driving an employee happiness culture. We are strategically sourcing folks in that space. I got a chief citizen officer that I'm working on right now to really drive the culture that we want. And we have the ability to pick that on day one and not have to sort of retrofit a good culture on a defective one. So we have an opportunity to get it right out of the gate. So we're really spending time developing that system to retain.
What kind of training opportunities are there out there for not only the bud tenders, but the growers, the processors? There's a lot of different needs there.
Well, I think training's still in development. I think in Michigan, we're kind of lucky in Michigan. We've had a 12-year runway with cannabis, more than other states. The caregiver model really gave way to exposure early on in 2009, and so there are a lot of very sophisticated growers in Michigan that have a lot of talent. And so it's pulling that into the space, and sometimes it's good and bad because they come with certain paradigms, and it's hard to sort of re-socialize some of those folks. But at the end of the day, we have a talent pool that I think is sitting dormant that needs to be pulled into the space. In terms of training, like any other business, anyone who's bringing folks in, even with a set of core competencies early on, you still want to train them to your system. So it's critically important that companies are developing their SOPs, their culture of what good looks like, and then building that into the candidates that they pull into the space. So I think training will happen in a just-in-time approach, but there's also some pent-up talent based on the 2009 caregiver model. There's folks out there that know how to grow, how to trim, and how to manage aspects of the business.
Ken, I know that there have been outfits that have come in from out of state to train people.
Yeah.
And how different are the out-of-state folks from homegrown, and how it works out that way?
Yeah. So what we did on the retail side is I got on a plane and spent a good part of a month looking for some top talent. And of course, there's no accrediting bodies just yet. If they do exist, they don't have the track record to really give you the sense of confidence in terms of their capabilities and training folks. But there are a lot of, if you go out to Cali, they've been at it since '96. There's a lot of provisioning centers, dispensaries that are much further ahead than we are. And so we've been pulling on West Coast resources. And I brought one in. We did a 10-day training session, 3 days of didactic classroom training, 2 days of simulated training, and the rest of it was basically real-time coaching in the live environment. And that was incredible. I mean, but you're constantly tweaking and refining. I would say that the talent out west is where you want to pull if you're trying to accelerate developing your training system today.
Mm-hmm. You know, I get calls at the paper, emails at the paper every single day, a lot of them. The number one question is, where and when can I buy? The number two question is, where can I go to get a job? Where can people go? I know that, Mike, you've had a job fair, but Matt, what other areas are there that people can go to find out, I don't know, if Weed Maps or Leafly, or if the jobs are available there?
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. Good morning, everyone. There is a job service, THC 123 in Michigan, which is being a job recruiter and a service to let people know what's available and what training is required. We don't yet have much in the way of a local training university, but that has happened in other states, and we hope and expect that will happen here in Michigan as well, so that not only trimmers can learn how to do the job, but people can learn how to operate the seed-to-sale tracking system that's required, that's highly technical. And a friend of mine who is a master grower in Colorado said, you know, when I came to work at this job, I was a master grower, and now I'm a compliance officer. And it's really the same job, but that shows how highly regulated it is and how important it is to understand the regulations and comply with them, because failure to do that will result in a license suspension or other actions, and that is really hurtful to a company that's especially a startup where capital is important and continuity of operation is really important as well. So there are some job services out there, but we hope that the Michigan Cannabis Industries Association will put together a job board. And I have seen, I mean, there are lots of jobs in Canada if anybody wants to move to Smiths Falls, Ontario, but it's cold up there, you know. I think, and hopefully the chamber will help participate, and I think this is a very welcome opportunity that the chamber is getting involved now, that we have a regulated market, or we're about to embark on a regulated adult use market.
Well, the classified advertising pages at the Free Press are pretty much gone, so I'm not sure if that's going to be an avenue for job listings, but perhaps in the future. Maurice, the State House yesterday, and perhaps even early as next week, is going to be voting on the expungement bills. And a marijuana component is on that. But how do you think that the expungement bills are going to affect the job market overall and the marijuana industry specifically?
Well, I mean, there's the talk about automatic expungement, which is what's needed, because previous to this bill, you know, in the state of Michigan, 96% of all those who are eligible for expungements do not take advantage of the expungement laws that currently exist. And so we know those offenders that, you know, have been convicted of low-level marijuana-related offenses, they haven't been taken advantage. They don't know how to circle and maneuver around the system. They don't want to hire an attorney, so you have to make it easy for them. I have an operation, a cannabis park going up on the west side of Detroit, and so we anticipate hiring about 100 individuals. Construction is going on now. We also put out, right? And so we probably had about over 200 people interested in applying for those positions. And so, but when we look closely, a lot of them had previous convictions. And so it's necessary to make it easier for them. I think the bill, if and when it does pass, you know, there still have to be an application or something filled out. We have to make it easier for them, because the jobs in this space, they're great. They're high paying. There's a potential to support your family, your livelihood. So it's critical that we make sure that we make it as easy as possible, because ultimately, you know, I was a former prosecutor. I ran major drugs in Wayne County, and we prosecuted a lot of young African-American men, 18 to 24 years old. They paid the price. And now that this industry is legal, we have to find a way, this is the social equity piece, we have to find a way to make sure that we remove those barriers to get them employed and get them into entrepreneurship opportunities.
Now, the bill regarding marijuana convictions in the House right now isn't automatic. You would still have to go and petition the court in order to do that. Do you think that that's going to be an impediment for folks to try to get their records expunged?
Absolutely, because they're not going to do it. So, that's why I mentioned the automatic expungement. I know that's potentially coming down the pike, has been proposed. But, once you say you have to apply for something, unless the education's out there, you have to get out there and the outreach has to be there. Maybe it's the employers who help. Employees come in, they have a previous conviction. My law firm, for example, we're offering free expungements. There's other law firms out there that are offering free expungements to individuals so they can just walk in and get that done. But it's absolutely a barrier when you say, then look, you still need to go through the court system. Someone who's been through the system don't want to go back into a courthouse. Or you need to fill out this paperwork or hire an attorney.
And Mike, I think that you're having an expungement fair this weekend.
Saturday.
Ken, is Medicine Man getting involved in that space at all?
Well, Medicine Man, we're involved with the state of Michigan's social equity program. So we're going out to different cities such as Detroit, Pontiac, and Inkster, and letting the participants know how they can get involved and get a license. A lot of these guys have backgrounds or convictions in their background that hinder them from normally getting involved. And a lot of them, like Maurice said, won't even try or attempt to because they just feel that they're down and out, and it's been this way for so long. So now what we're doing is giving these people an opportunity for redemption. And I think that's what's really great with this program is that they're looking for people who were hurt from the war on drugs and disproportionately targeted, and are giving these guys an opportunity to redeem what was putting them in jail. Is now it's going to actually provide a legal job and income for their families.
Now, the social equity program for the state isn't particularly generous. Tell us about what the social equity program does.
Yes. So if you've lived in, they've selected so many cities that they felt was disproportionately targeted, and if you live in that city for the last 5 years, you will get a 25% reduction in your app fees and your license fees. If you had a marijuana conviction, you'll get an additional 25% off. And then if you've been a caregiver for 2 years, we get an additional 10% off for a possibility of a total of 60% off of your license application fees and things of the such. There are a lot of resources and attorneys, such as our attorney Denise Policello with Cannabis Attorneys of Michigan. They're offering reduced fees to help these participants get involved. A lot of these people need accountants and engineers that are going to be able to get their site plans set up and put together. And a lot of them need capital funding as well. So we feel that the Banking Act, that needs to hurry up and pass so a lot of the people that do need this assistance can try to find funding through the banks, because right now, a lot of these guys don't have that access to that funding. They don't have that family that has $1 million saved up that can just give them this money to get started. So hopefully programs such as the social equity program and attorneys such as Denise and accountants and engineers, they're going to be giving people an opportunity for reduced fees because they see the benefit in providing a social equity program.
I know that other states have created funds, big funds, to provide low-interest loans and things like that for social equity eligible people. Do you think that the state can and should do more?
Absolutely, because right now it's all through private investors that are bringing the funding on board. A lot of them want equity. We are starting to find some that are doing debt financing, and that's great. But the state does need to step in, and because if not, the program is just going to be on paper almost, and you're not going to really see the impact and the benefit. But there are cities such as Ypsilanti who are already setting aside licenses just for social equity partners. So they've already set aside 3 licenses for the upcoming adult use.
Mike, tell us a little bit about the expungement clinic that you're having this weekend, and if that plays into the social equity space at all, too.
Yeah, it definitely does. So it's Saturday in Detroit. And we're working with Bonita Money. She is a well-known personality in the space who's got a mission across the U.S. to really drive this expungement in a big way. And what I've learned in talking with her is that it's more than just expungement. There's a housing issue. There's a social issue. And I think what we're doing at the clinic is bringing other ancillary resources to help support getting these guys back on their feet, more importantly. And the hope is we can still interest them in coming into the space. There's a Michigan shortage today in terms of qualified workers, and it makes sense to tap this resource in a big way. And to Maurice's point, 100% agree. Here we are. I barely consumed as a kid. I was an athlete growing up. I spent 21 years in healthcare, and here we are in the space benefiting on the backs of those who got ahead of us, who took risks, who may have consumed for medical reasons, and it just doesn't make any sense to continue without supporting them in a comprehensive, significant way, not just for the sake of PR, but to actually bring them in, because like I said before, there is some pent-up talent in that group, and we just need to unleash it. Talent is hard. Anyone who owns a business knows how difficult it is to secure talent and retain it. And I think there's a lot there. I have witnessed it. I have talked to many in that space, and I'm blown away. But they're scared. To Maurice's point, and we gotta hold their hand. We gotta bring them in.
I've heard from employees at the different businesses that they're having a hard time getting loans for cars. They're having a hard time getting loans for houses, things like that, because they're involved in the marijuana industry, in the cannabis field. Do businesses have an obligation to help out employees in those types of regards and helping them just in the daily necessities of life that they're having a hard time getting?
No, I believe so. Ultimately, when an employee takes that leap of faith and say, I'm going to work in a cannabis field or work at a dispensary, there's still a small stigma, related to the industry. I mean, you have to help them. One is higher wages, right? Let them share in the wealth that's coming into the industry. But also offering insurance. There's not a lot of discussion around that. I know there are some select businesses that are offering insurance to help families, or even, access to, by purchasing a home, real estate, helping with those aspects. And all of that goes into training, right? And so what we found is, right now, it's really incumbent on the industry to take training in those other aspects upon ourselves. We have to train them. We have to make sure they have high-paying jobs. We need to make sure that the jobs come with benefits as well.
Ken, Mike, do you have any thoughts on that? I don't mean that you need to buy your employees a car or something, but what can you do to help out your employees?
Luckily, I know when it comes to these employees getting loans for homes or cars, we luckily had an accountant that helped us set up a payroll service to where many of our employees, they're on our payroll W-2s, and they haven't had any problems with attaining those loans and getting homes and cars and such as that. So for us, we haven't experienced too much of an issue with that.
I think in general for us, like I said before, we have a whole employee happiness strategy that's resourced and connected to our chief citizen officer who is dedicated to just improving the lives of those who work for us, far beyond just providing them skills to consume essentially in the business. We just want to make them better humans. And I think overall, these high-paying jobs with an equity share component, all our employees participate in our equity share component. They're blown away. I mean, most of them who've been in the space as bud tenders, very rare to get the kind of wages that they're getting today with an equity component and full benefits. That blows them away. The fact that we got a full benefits package, 401k, dental, medical, is astounding. So, but we are very in tune with our culture, and so, there hasn't been a situation where someone needed a loan yet, but I'm going to be paying attention to that. We'll see. We're going to help as much as we can.
As we've seen, the transition into the medical market had a few hiccups with the state. The transition to the recreational market is going to be experiencing some hiccups too, and perhaps some delays. Matt, is there things that you think the state can do to make that transition a little bit more easy?
Well, absolutely. The whole program was not rolled out very smoothly in the first place, where dispensaries, colloquially spoken, those provisioning centers, a lot of them were licensed before growers and processors were licensed. The right way to roll out the program would have been to license the growers, because it takes 3 months at least to grow and then harvest and cure cannabis and then process it and get it to a dispensary. So we had lots of dispensaries open, but no supply. And so even though in 2013 the state Supreme Court said it's illegal for a caregiver to sell to anyone but that person's up to 5 patients, we had this gray market system that was operating, and the state continued it. So now we're in this very strange area where it's illegal for a caregiver to sell to anyone but their 5 patients, but the state is allowing the growers and the processors to buy from caregivers. So, you know, what day is it? Which side are we on? It's all a real crazy world out there. It could have been done better, but we are where we are now. And I think the important thing is, well, partly what's so restrictive is that of the 1,773 cities, towns, and villages in Michigan, only about 115 or 20 have passed ordinances that opt in. So under the MRTMA, the adult use law, under medical, there was an opt-in. A city had to opt in order for facilities to be able to locate there. Under MRTMA, it's the opposite. If a city does not opt out, someone can locate there. So we've had about 1,000 cities that have opted out. We have another 700 or so that have yet to opt out. And the procedure is that once someone applies for a facility in a municipality, the state sends the city clerk notice, and there's a form for them to fill out. Either this facility is in compliance with an ordinance that we have, or we have no ordinance. And so my concern was that the clerks were going to refuse to return the forms. Well, now the form says on it, the failure of the clerk to return the form will not stop the issuance of a license. And so what I think the big unanswered question right now is what is going to happen in those 500 to 700 municipalities that have not opted out on Friday, and including Detroit. And if someone goes and applies on Friday for a facility and then the city passes a moratorium or a ban, how is that going to play out? My suspicion is that until there is a license, the courts will rule that there is no property interest until that license actually has been issued. If I could return just for a second to the social equity component. The 60% break on fees and costs is great, but we're talking about 60% of somewhere between $4,000 and $50,000. But that's not the expense of building one of these facilities. The expense is the real estate and the build out of the building and the architecture and the legal fees. And you can do without a lawyer, but you can't do without an architect, because you have to submit stamped plans in order to do that. And so, interestingly, the state has now said to applicants, well, what is your social equity plan? Every applicant is required to include something in a social equity plan with no guidance about what that might be. And I have seen plans that say, well, we're going to add to the tax base and we're going to add employment. Well, how does that make them special? Because every entity will pay taxes and every entity will add to employment. But what I've suggested to organizations is to pair with a local nonprofit and something that doesn't involve children, even though those are all very worthwhile. But you don't want someone to say, you know, what about the kids? Because the objections we have are, what about the kids? What about driving under the influence? And those type of things. So it'll be interesting what creative solutions come about. One of the things that some companies are saying, we're willing to help other companies. I find that odd in that what other industry do you have people helping their competitors? That's just unusual, not that it's impossible. But it'll be interesting to see what creative suggestions and solutions come about. And by the way, I've lived in Detroit for 5 years, so maybe that program isn't perfect.
Mike and Ken, what kind of challenges are you seeing about the transition from medical to recreational?
I think Matthew had said it earlier, just what's going to be the shortage supply, and that's going to be a big issue because, like he said, the growers and processors should have been licensed first, and to bring this about. But we hear that the state may offer a solution with opening the market back up to caregivers and allowing there to be a certain allotment of time to where recreational license holders can purchase from caregivers and bring that product in. We're hearing certain things like that. It's not for sure, but I know they're going to be looking into a solution for this because once recreational sales start, it's going to be nothing around. And so a lot of people are going to be disappointed and upset because we've had people call our store now going on a year. Like once we had voted it in last year, they've been calling, can we come today? Can we come today? And it's just not ready yet. So it's going to be interesting to see how the state handles this.
Ken and Matthew covered it. I mean, I'm curious what the plant count situation is going to look like. And as a grower, vertically operated operation, I'm trying to understand how we're going to be dividing the medical products from the rec products, even though there's no evidence-based research to really differentiate the two. But yet, regulatorily, we got to find ways to separate things out. And I'm not sure how all that's going to take flight. But there's so many other concerns that I have that I don't think we have time for, given the 3 minutes and 55 seconds.
Well, obviously, one of the big concerns is the communities and where you're going to be able to locate. And how do you convince a community that this is a good and reasonable business to have in your towns?
You know, and this gets to Matt's point is you have to engage the community. One of the things that, that I've known that some of my clients have done differently is our community benefits agreements, right? You go in, you explain to them why this is going to be beneficial to them. But you get down to the meats and bones, it's just not enough to say, okay, I'm going to reduce fees by 60%. Detroit, for example, we have a wealth of potential employees out there. But what are we going to do to make sure that this industry hires them? So 25%, 50% of all your employees must be from the city of Detroit. Those are the type of things you can put into community benefits agreements. If you educate the community and say, look, if someone wants to come into your community, talk to them before you allow that city or municipality to approve them. You make sure that they enter into a community benefits agreement, hire from within the community, train from within the community, support activities and things throughout that community, whether it's for young people, the local Boys and Girls Club. I think when you do those type of things, the community will then embrace you because they see a benefit from the industry.
Are you hearing that communities are requiring some sort of community benefits packages?
Well, as we know, municipalities cannot require it, but they can be very creative in their wording. We're going to grant so many points based on, so for example, Pontiac's doing that. They want to know what your community benefits agreements are. City of Detroit has kind of tested it. So the bottom line is they can't necessarily require it, but they can give points based upon what you're offering to the community. And community groups are taking advantage of that.
Kathy, if I may, one of the things we're doing that I think is helpful for a lot of the municipalities we're in is we're donating $25,000 every year to the community fund that we create. So in Marshall, we got the Marshall Community Fund. In Flint, we got the Flint Community Fund. And that's just the start. So I think there's more we can do to help some of these cities financially, but also dedicating our resources to volunteering their time, paid time, to doing worthwhile activities in the space, I think really is helpful. The other thing is, at Common Citizen, even in a recreational market, I still see patients at the end of the supply chain. And if you go out to Cali, you can see that a great majority of recreational patients are still consuming for medical reasons, even though they don't fit a traditional clinical diagnosis. So pain and sleep are really the things that you see in the rec market. So I think keeping that mission as part of the discussions we're having at the municipality level and letting them know we're not just trying to get people blitzed for the sake of it, even though there's a market for that for sure. I think it's really important that we just raise the bar on class sophistication and bring them into the fold and engage like any other business would in their space.
We only have about 30 seconds left, and while the state has said that it may be March or April before the rec market really gets underway, the sales anyway, what are your predictions on when the first sales will be? Just a two-word answer for me.
First legal sales?
Yes. Right.
You mean without a gift?
Yeah, yes. Without a gift.
It depends on how Lara handles it. It could be as early as November, but it looks more likely that it will be after there's a crop that's been grown. People are applying in November. They might get licensed in December, and then it'll take a few months.
Okay, well, that'll do it for us. Thanks.
Kathy.
Thank you.